he's pasturing the flocks, so they're shepherds, and he at 17 years old, he's with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, who is, of course, those are not his mother. Who is his mother? Rachel, right? Okay. So, and it says that he brought a bad report of them to their father. Now, based on what we know about the brothers so far, that's probably not surprising. But then we're told specifically that Israel, Jacob, his name changed to Israel, loves Joseph more than any of his other sons because he was the son of his old age. And as we know, because he was the son of Rachel. To show that, he made him wear a robe or a coat of many colors. But his brothers saw that, and they saw that their father loved him more than he loved them, and so they hated him. And they could not speak peacefully to him at all. So, Joseph, go ahead.
When I was reading through this, it seems like Joseph knew what was going to happen before it happened, and that's why he gave them the bad report. Is that a true statement? Because that's what I was gathering from that. Because it doesn't say why he brought back a bad report.
Yeah.
But being that he's a dreamer and he seems to have a vision of what is to come, he knew what was going to happen later on.
Yeah, so the dreams are clearly prophetic. So whether he had any other prophetic signs from God before that, I'm not sure. Like you said, it doesn't say what the bad report was. And it seems like the bad report came before the dream, so I don't know if the dreams were kind of his first clue of, something prophetic from God. I'm not sure.
We see later, Jacob clearly uses him as kind of a check against his brother.
Check on them. Whether or not he's expecting them to be getting into trouble isn't exactly clear.
Yeah.
But it's possible, and so it's certainly possible that the report simply was they were doing a bad job with whatever they were supposed to be doing, and that's what they brought.
Yeah, I mean, whatever it is, we already know based on the brothers are not doing well morally, okay, and that's going to be proven further here. So he has this dream, and he tells it to his brothers, and when he tells it to them, they hate him even more, because the dream is that they're out in the field binding the sheaves, and Joseph's sheaf stands upright, and all the brothers' sheaves all gather around him and bow down to Joseph's sheaves. So his brothers are upset about that and say, are you going to reign over us? Are you going to have dominion over us? All right, so think about the youngest brother and all the older brothers saying, we're all going to bow down to you. So they hated him even more for his dreams, but he dreamed another dream. And in this one, he again told it to his brothers, and this one, the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to him, specifically. So this one he also told to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him. And Israel says, what is this that you've dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers bow down before you? So that made his brothers jealous, but it says his dad, Israel, even though he rebuked him, said he kept it in mind.
He's very faithful, and when he gets to Egypt, and everything he does is good. But he seems like he's got a problem as a young man with pride. If I've had these dreams, he wasn't stupid. He had to know what that sounded like to them. And he's 17 at the beginning of this, and these guys are all considerably older than him. It's like these men in their 20s and maybe 30s. And this kid, the 17-year-old, is saying this to us. It's like Joseph didn't have, or maybe he just, God sent me the dream, so I don't care.
So, yeah, go ahead, John.
Nobody's perfect, not even Jacob. And as far as the earlier part, the simple word is tattletale.
Yeah. Yeah. So agreed. I mean, obviously, it doesn't seem like a smart thing to do. It'd be the smartest thing to do to keep that to yourself. But Anyone who's ever known any 17-year-old boy in the history of the world understands that he is not going to keep that information to himself. Okay? Especially if he's been a little spoiled by his father all his life, and his father is using him to test his brothers and all these things. It's not going to happen. So yeah, if he were 45 and a little smarter, maybe. Maybe. Okay? All right. So we're told. So at some point, then his brothers are out again pasturing the flock, and as David said, Israel sends Joseph to go check on them, to get a report of what's going on with them. Joseph goes. It was probably a trip to Shechem, and then when he gets there, he doesn't find them. So he finds a man and says, I'm looking for my brothers. And the man says, well, they've gone to Dothan, which is about 15 or 20 miles from Shechem. Okay, so he has to travel again to go find them in Dothan. And as he's going, his brothers see him coming from afar and conspire together to kill him because they hate him that much. And so they said, here comes this dreamer. So come, let's kill him, and then we'll throw him into one of the pits. And then we'll say that a fierce animal devoured him, and we will see what becomes of his dreams. So you can see that in their mind, well, if we kill him, obviously his dreams are never going to happen. We're never going to bow down to him because he'll be dead.
The other thing with this scenario, his brothers are all out working.
And he's with his dad, and his dad sends him out, and it's like, is that another thorn in the side? Because, like, we're all out here doing what we're supposed to do, and you're just hanging out with dad, and now you're gonna come back and snitch on us again.
Yeah, I would assume so. I mean, we already know he's brought a bad report once before, at least once. Again, he is much younger, so that might be some of the reason he's home. But again, it definitely seems like he's the baby of the family. Yeah. So at that point, Reuben then speaks up and says, "Let's not shed his blood. We'll just throw him into the pit, but don't kill him." But Reuben, then, he has a plan to rescue them out of their hands and restore him later to his father. So when that's what they did. When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of the robe of many colors. They took him and they threw him into the pit, but it wasn't a pit that had water in it. It was just empty. So they sat down to eat. Time for lunch. And as they're eating, they look up and they see a caravan. So a traveling caravan of merchants, Ishmaelites, who have merchandise that they're taking on their way down to Egypt. So then Judah speaks up and says, well, what profit is it to us if we just kill him? We can sell him, to these Ishmaelites, and then our hand won't be on him because, after all, he is our brother. He is our own flesh. So the brothers listen to him. They sell him to the traders for 20 shekels of silver, and the traders take Joseph down to Egypt.
And the thing about that is 20 pieces of silver is not really a price.
That would be paid for even a dead man. You know, he's a young, able-bodied man, so he's probably worth more than 20. So they recognize right away that they're going to make a pretty good profit on Joseph when they sell him.
Take him to Egypt. Yeah, I mean, they're traders, right? So they're going to buy low so that they can sell high when they get to Egypt, right? So at that point, Reuben then comes back to the pit, intending to get Joseph out, but Joseph's not there. So he's upset. He tears his clothes as a sign of how upset he was, and he goes back to his brothers and he says, "The boy is gone, and where shall I go?" But then obviously it doesn't tell us that, but obviously his brothers would explain it to him. So they took Joseph's robe, they killed a goat, and they dipped the robe in the blood of the goat, and they took the robe of many colors back to their father. Yes.
Well, I think it comes to the point here where Reuben had tried to save him. Reuben's the eldest.
Yes.
So he's understanding that it's his responsibility to keep these people in check, to keep these other brothers in check.
Yes.
And he said, where am I to go? He said, the boy's not here, it's for me, where am I to go? Because he knows his dad is gonna lay it at his feet. He's the eldest brother, he should have taken control of that situation.
Yes, and while we're there, what other motivation might Reuben have in this situation?
Was his father's concubine wife.
Yeah. So back in chapter 35, he's already slept with Bilhah, and so it doesn't exactly say, but you can certainly imagine that he's trying to get back into his dad's good graces here. Yeah, and so I think you see that a little bit. On the one hand, he is trying to save him, but on the other hand, when he sees that he's gone, he's upset for himself, right? What am I gonna do? I don't have the ability to take him back. Yeah.
I also wonder, because he was the young, therefore should have been in charge. They should have listened to him. I'm wondering if maybe because of what he had done, the respect that he should have had wasn't really there.
Yeah, maybe because they do initially, but then they listen to Judah and change the plan while he's gone. Yeah. Okay, so they take the coat back to Israel. They say, "Hey, we found this. Please identify it. Is it your son's?" And he does. Of course, Israel does. He says, "It's my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him, and he's dead." And so Jacob tore his garments. He put sackcloth on, mourned for his son many days, and his sons and his daughters rose up to comfort him. It's kind of odd to think of his sons trying to comfort him when they're the ones who did this. But he refused to be comforted and said, "I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." In other words, the end of my days, I will be mourning. Okay. So let's go back. So actually, before we talk about this, as we mentioned, before we talk about some of the details of the story, as we mentioned, we're starting a new section here where the focus is on Jacob's sons, but specifically on Joseph. And I want us to think about just kind of the rest of the book has this focus on Joseph as a ruler, on kingship, on ruling. And I want us to just see a few of those things now, a few of the details, and there'll be more as we go along, but a few of the details now that help us kind of get in this mindset as we go through these chapters. So, so there's this focus of kingship and rule, and Joseph, of course, is going to become a ruler. By the end, he's a ruler acting like a king in Egypt. And we see the start of this with these dreams, right? These dreams are prophetic. All the dreams in the book of Genesis are prophetic or from God. They're not just, in the middle of the night I had this weird dream. They're prophecies from God. And you see, notice the words that are used. Where they say, "Will you reign over us? Will you have dominion over us?" Well, what does that remind you of if you think of dominion in the book of Genesis? Yeah.
Adam having dominion over the animals.
Yes, so that was from the beginning, man was to have dominion over the earth, dominion over the animals. So this was God's plan for man from the beginning, and we've talked about that, to be a ruler. They talked about his brothers would bow down to him, right? That's what you do to a king, to a ruler. All right? The coat of many colors. Someone turn to 2 Samuel 13 and verse 18. So the coat of many colors is a very interesting word because we've all grown up, with Joseph and the coat of many colors, right? Extremely popular story. The truth is, in translation, they basically have no real idea what what that word that's translated many colors means. All right? Someone read 2 Samuel 13, verse 18.
Now she was wearing a long robe with sleeves, for thus were the virgin daughters of the king dressed. So the servant put her out and bolted the door after her.
Okay. So this is talking about the daughter of the king, right? And she was given a coat with many sleeves. That long sleeve. What was it translated? Sorry.
Long robe with sleeves.
Long robe with sleeves. Okay? The sleeves there is the exact same word that's translated here as many colors. And that's the only other place it occurs in the Bible, and it's basically the only other place that it's not, we haven't seen that word used in other writings from the time outside of that. So the reality is people don't know exactly what the many colors is, and and in 2 Samuel it's translated as sleeves. In that context, clearly it has something to do with royalty, right? Because it was a designation of royalty. And so it seems like in this case, clearly it's something special that Jacob is giving to show Joseph. You know, he only gave such a special coat to Joseph, so he's showing his favoritism. But it also has to do with royalty, right? Which is the point, obviously, which Joseph is going to become royalty. All right? Yeah.
I wondered if it was such an important coat, why he was wearing it for every day.
Oh, that's true, which maybe goes back to the point that he's not out working, right? He's at home. Yeah, that's a good point, right? Yeah, so clearly showing his favorite. And then as we go through the whole story, Joseph has no specific sins recorded. Okay? So what you talked about this telling his brothers his dreams, that's about the worst thing you could say about him. And I don't know that you would say that that's a sin, maybe bad judgment. But for the rest, there's a whole lot. The rest of the Genesis is going to be primarily about Joseph, and it never records a sin, which, as we said, is unusual. Everyone else that had anything lengthy written about him, it does, right? Noah and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all these people have sins recorded. We don't for Joseph, all right? And so the point that I think that it's making is a couple things. Number one, Joseph is going to be a fulfillment of the promises to Abraham and Jacob that kings will come from you. Right? That was God has specifically stated that in the blessings to Abraham and to Jacob. But also, it's a fulfillment of God's initial desire for mankind to have dominion over the earth. Okay? So Joseph is going to show that was the plan, that's what God wanted from creation. That's what God repeated to Noah after the flood, in the recreation that we talked about. We're going to see that in Joseph. Someone go to Genesis 41 and 38, skipping ahead. I don't usually do this, making one exception, one spoiler. Genesis 41 and verse 38. Go ahead.
Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. That was 39, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, go ahead and read 38.
And Pharaoh said to the servants, can you find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God?
Okay. So after Joseph interprets the dream for Pharaoh, Pharaoh's answer is, can we find somebody have we ever seen anybody like this in who is the Spirit of God? All right. Remember we talked all the way back in creation about the Spirit of God, the breath of God was hovering over the waters from the very beginning, and then God put his breath into man. Same word here is the Spirit of God, the breath of God. So Pharaoh recognizes this is someone who is acting like God, acting in the image of God. All right, so Joseph, the story of Joseph, and I'm just hinting at this now so that we'll kind of have this mindset as we read through and go through through all these chapters. Joseph is an example, a picture for us of someone who is acting in the image of God. And that's not to say, by the way, that he never sinned. I'm certain that he did, because the scripture tells us that no one has ever not sinned. But it's not recorded for us to emphasize to us that Joseph is going to be a picture of what it's like to be in the image of God, to be a ruler, to have dominion the way God intended for man. Does that make sense to you guys? We'll talk more about it as we go through the chapter. All right. So going through this text then, going through here in chapter 37. So we see this escalating trouble between the brothers, all right, as it goes through the report. And I asked you guys, as you look at the brothers, what is the brothers' attitude toward Joseph? They don't like him, all right? A little stronger than that, Karen and then Cindy.
A lot of it was jealousy and envy.
Okay, jealousy, envy.
Okay.
All right, yeah.
According to chapter 42, they clearly felt guilt.
Yes. Okay. Yes. We don't see it here, but over time they do feel guilt. We'll get to that. Yeah. Okay. All right. So verse 2, it emphasizes from the text that these are the sons from different mothers. So the sons that he brought a bad report were only his half-brothers, right? So again, you see that kind of, this rivalry that we've seen going all the way back to Leah and Rachel is continuing into the next generation. He brought the bad report, we talked about that. Jacob's favoritism, all right? So Jacob is showing specific favoritism, like, again, like his parents, right? Towards him, he's showing special favoritism and making it really obvious with the coat, kind of putting it in their face, so to speak. And so we're told specifically that they hated him, okay? They couldn't speak peacefully to him, right? And we've seen families like that, right? Where they just can't, like the animosity, the hatred is built up so much they just can't speak peacefully at all, right? That's the description here. And the hatred grows because of the dreams in verse 5. They hated him even more. And then verse 8, they hated him even more, right? So it's growing, it's escalating. And then because of they have the envy, the jealousy that you guys mentioned, until you get to verse 18 and they're ready to kill him. All right? So we see, again, this growing trouble. So where in Genesis have we seen these things before? Cain and Abel. And? Yes, Jacob and Esau. Okay? The same things, right? Hatred, wanting to kill their brothers. In fact, there's a whole lot of trouble between siblings in Genesis, right? And we've talked about that, and this is going to kind of a new level somewhat. But I guess not, because all the way back at the beginning, they're killing each other, right? I guess in more detail. But when people are not acting in God's image, then it creates these problems between families, between people. But the point here specifically is that Joseph's brothers are being compared to Cain and Esau, right? That's not a good thing, right? These are two, villains of Genesis so far, and Jacob's brothers are being compared specifically to them, right? All right, so in verse 19, it's interesting then as they hatch this plan, in verse 19, they say this dreamer, right? Here comes this dreamer. The word there is literally the master of dreams, which is very interesting translation, because that's going to be true, right? Not that he was the master, but God made him the master of dreams. So that's somewhat prophetic. All right, we talked about Reuben. Reuben attempts to save his life. We really talked about this, and why did he do that? He wants to take him back to his father, but really, it doesn't seem like his motive is really unselfish. Really, he's trying to, do it for his own, maybe out of some sense that he should, but also probably out of some sense that he's trying to get back in good graces with his father. And then Judah comes up with a plan to sell Joseph. Why did Judah do that? Why did Judah have this plan to sell him to the traders? I'm sorry? It wouldn't kill him, right? It would save his life, true? Yeah. Right. Okay, so is he doing this unselfishly? No. If we sell him, we get a profit. If we kill him, well. But if we sell him, we get something out of it too, right? We get a profit, okay? And so I won't turn there for time, but it's really similar. In Genesis 29, verse 14, that particular verse, Laban uses the same language about he's our flesh and blood, referring to Jacob. But then, of course, he's going to spend all those years taking advantage of Jacob for his own profit, right? So Judah is similar to Laban, right? That he's in it for profit, right? Hey, it's a double benefit, right? We get rid of the problem child, and we can get a bunch of money out of it. All right. So then they complete the job by deceiving their father. All right. So the experts in deception strike again, right? These guys were great at deceiving the men of Shechem. Thank you. The men of Shechem. And now they've learned from their parents and their grandparents. They're experts at this point, and they can get anybody to believe anything. And what do they use to deceive their father? A goat. Kill a goat. Yeah, and use Joseph's own clothes. All right? So think about that just for a second. We'll come back to it. In verse 33, we're told specifically they ask Joseph to identify the coat, and it says that he recognizes the coat. So he recognizes the coat, but he doesn't recognize the deception that's coming on him. A deception that is based on killing a goat and using Joseph's own clothes against him. What does that sound like?
Oh, not answering your question,
Okay.
just another thought.
Sure.
Was, they presented it, is this Joseph's coat?
Right. Right.
Why did they do it that way?
Right. Right. I mean, after all, they all had the same coat, right? It could be anybody's coat. No, this is obviously they knew exactly what it was. Yeah, right. Good point. All right, but does anybody, but killing a goat and using his own clothes as part of a deception sound like something? Yeah, right. That's how Rebecca helped Jacob deceive his father, and now his sons are using the goat and his own clothes to deceive him. Right? So even though we've seen Jacob at this point has changed so much in his attitude and his faithfulness toward God, and he's one who has faith towards God, all these problems are still coming back. This similar as what we've been talking about. Sorry, that's Genesis 27:20. So again, and Dale pointed out a couple weeks ago, even Jacob was, a product of his parenting, and now these children are a product of their parenting, even though Jacob himself has changed. All right. Other comments? Other comments on chapter 37? Thoughts? Yeah.
You know, we're talking about before it makes you realize the concept of it. They call it the father in the midst of grief.
Yeah.
And
I wonder, when you talk about Joseph, and for a while Rachel hadn't had Benjamin yet and died yet. I wonder what her part was before she had Benjamin, how the relationship was with Joseph and the rest of the family and her being there.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of things.
And that's a question I have. Was Rachel alive, or was she dead at this point?
No,
35.
In terms of the chronology of Genesis, she's already died.
right.
So it's interesting. It is interesting in the dream. Jacob says, "Shall your mother and I and your brothers?" So obviously there are other mothers in the family. So presumably he's referring to them. But again, assuming that this is told in order, she's passed, and I think she has. So yeah.
So that's what's interesting. He mentions, shall I and your mother bow down to Rachel?
Yeah.
And so he mentions her when he's talking about bowing down to Joseph in the dream, but Rachel's dead. And then what Brother Calvin was saying is that his brothers, Joseph's brothers, were obviously very afraid to mention that they had sold Joseph away because they would incur the wrath of their father. So that's why they didn't mention it, but they caused their father untold grief.
And the text is very detailed and descriptive of the grief, right? And if you've lost a child or known people who have lost a child, the grief stays with them forever. And this was the special child, right? This was the description of I shall go down to Sheol in my mourning. I mean, this is, and it does, and we're going to see that. We're going to follow Jacob to an extent to the rest of his life, and we're going to see the grief still there at the end of his life.
I always thought too that Joseph, the way he was being treated was because of Rachel's death. Because Rachel was well beloved. That was when he loved the most. And when she died, he took that love and put it on Joseph.
That's a good point. All right. Let's go on to chapter 38. So in chapter 38, feels like kind of an interruption in the story of Joseph, because it's going to pick right back up with Joseph in Egypt in chapter 39, and we have this other story in the middle. I think it's not, because I think it's intentionally continuing to set up this contrast between Joseph and his brothers, specifically between Joseph and Judah. All right, so I think it's intentional that it's that way, because it is showing us the difference, this kind of extreme contrast between the two. Yeah.
At least that'll give you an idea of how long Rachel was involved in that situation.
Yeah, I don't know if we know.
Because he knows.
There's several years. We know years go by, but I don't know if we know the exact answer.
It seemed like Benjamin was still kind of young, when they had to go back for the lad. I don't know how old he was.
Yeah, I'm not sure that. I don't think that word lad means the way we would think of it as like a youngster.
But he was younger.
Years have gone by.
But he was the youngest.
Yeah. But years have gone by at that point. So we'll talk about that.
That way I would know how long Rachel was involved in that situation.
Yeah. So chapter 38, we have this story about Judah, and we're introduced at the beginning talking about Judah, and Judah is obviously the center of this story. So we see immediately that he marries a Canaanite woman, and then we're told about their family and three sons that she has. In chapter 2, how does it describe his marriage to the Canaanite woman? I'm sorry, verse 2, chapter 38, verse 2. He saw her and he took her, okay? So I've been going back to this point. This is the 5th time in Genesis that someone has seen and took, and I mentioned this in the invitation on Wednesday. Every time it's a bad thing, right? So in this case, he's taking her as his wife, but it's using that same language that he saw her and she's a Canaanite, all right? So what is that? So we think about Judah, someone in the line of Abraham and Isaac and all that, marrying a Canaanite. What do we immediately think of? Yeah.
All the measures that were taken before this to not marry a Canaanite woman. And then, what does he do?
Right.
There she is, a Canaanite woman, and he's in, she's in.
Right. When it was a wife for Isaac and a wife for Jacob, like you said, extreme measures. Do not, and chapter 24, verse 3, chapter 28, verse 1, do not take a Canaanite for your wife, right? Go all the way back to the homeland. We talked about the Canaanites are under a curse. They know that. Don't take a Canaanite. And here's Judah, sees a Canaanite woman, I'll take her. Okay? The exact opposite of the way it's supposed to be, Joel.
More and more into sin, coincides perfectly with 1 Corinthians 15:33. Yes. Yes. And that's exactly the point here, right? So first of all, the same point
we've been making all along. It matters who you marry. Okay, we see that again and again and again. But to your point, then look at verse 12. There's this man Hira, the Adulamite, in other words, a Canaanite, and he's described as his friend, right? You see that? So he's marrying a Canaanite. He's got Canaanite friends, and we've seen all along the family has kept this separation from the people of the land, and Judah is just obliterating that, right? He's just acting like one of them, okay? So we could think 1 Corinthians 15:33, do not be deceived. What? Evil companions corrupt good morals. It's never changed, right? Judah is apparently deceived or doesn't care or whatever, but he's just right in there entirely with the Canaanites. Yeah.
Israel left, or Jacob left Laban, he is not welcome back there. They cannot go back there. Because I know we talk about watch between me and you, all this. That's, to my understanding of the scriptures, he said, you're all right, don't come back here.
Yeah.
Maybe
that's possible. That's possible. Either way, I still, the text is clearly, this is not a good thing. This is not a good choice, marrying a Canaanite. Right. I mean, yeah. If that's true, there's got to be a third option out there, right? Other than just marrying the Canaanite, right? Okay. So then we're told about his family. So he has 3 sons. The oldest marries this a woman named Tamar. We aren't told anything about her or her background. And then the next thing we find is that he's killed by God because he's evil. Doesn't say what he did. I don't know. But it must have been pretty bad because God just killed him on the spot. Okay? So this is Judah's family here, right? The oldest marries Tamar, but then God just kills him. So now there's this situation that we've talked about already. Tamar has no husband and no son. Okay? And we talked about these cultural customs. So I'm going to go through this quickly because we've talked about it. Deuteronomy 25, the law of Moses is going to put rules in place for how you deal with this. And the rule is that the oldest brother is required to take her as his wife so that she isn't just left with no way to defend herself, no one to take care of her, etc. And so, but also what it says is when that happens, is the first son of that marriage is going to be credited as heir of the deceased brother to keep the family name going. Okay? So when he does that, in their mind, in their customs, that child is going to be the son of the father who died, the first one who died. Okay? All right, so that's important to understand. So, and then there's the thing, if the brother refuses to do that, then there's consequences of that. He's like publicly shamed, and again, this is all Deuteronomy 25, and we see similarly in Ruth that he's publicly shamed for not doing what he's supposed to, okay? So, the second son, Onan, publicly accepts her as his wife, but privately he refuses to do his duty, right? He refuses to actually impregnate her. The details here are graphic, I think, intentionally so. So I won't be as graphic here, but I think when you read through the text, it's intentionally graphic, just describing how bad this is, okay? And for that, God kills him. Because he refused to do what he was supposed to. And I think it's even worse because publicly he's making it look like he's doing what he's supposed to, but privately he's not. Okay? So Judah's family is doing really well. Both of his sons are so evil, God just kills them on the spot. Judah's response so now it should go to the third son, and Judah's response is, I'm not doing that. Okay? Because my first two sons died when they were married to her. So he's treating her like a bad luck charm, right? When in reality, what's the problem? His sons are evil, but he's treating it like it's her fault, even though she's done nothing wrong at all that we're told about, okay? Okay, so Tamar has been mistreated by Judah's sons, by Judah himself. So we have the story where so obviously time goes by here. We know that from later on, from the end of the story, that time has gone by. Judah says that he's going to give him her son when he grows up, but time has gone by and he hasn't done that. Yeah.
Back up just one more point.
Sure.
Or marrying someone that you're unequally yoked to, it's not just the consequence of you struggle that you're going to have, but your children. Because what are they learning? Who's teaching them?
Right.
And he's the perfect example. And look at his children.
Exactly.
Exactly.
He is completely engrossed in Canaanite culture from his marriage and his friends and his family. Completely reflects that, right? And he reflects that, right? Because Tamar disguises herself, including a veil, so she takes off her mourning clothes, the clothes of a widow, and puts on the clothes of a prostitute, because she hears that Judah's going to go that way. So what is her opinion of Judah? Right. And in her mind, if she sits out in the gate when Judah passes by looking like a prostitute, she's got a pretty good idea of what he's going to do, and that's exactly what he does. Right? So this guy's reputation precedes him. This guy is a full-on Canaanite. And further, when you talk about later when they go back to find her, and that there it changes the word to a cult prostitute. In other words, the prostitution that was used as an act of worship to false gods. So having sex with a prostitute as a form of worship in idolatry. Okay? That's what he thinks these are, and he's cool with that. Right? And that's what he does. Okay? All right, getting behind. He commits adultery with her. The price is that he has to pay is a young goat. But he's traveling, he doesn't have the goat with him. So she says, well, how do I know you're going to come back and give me the goat? So he gives her his personal items as a surety until he comes back and brings the goat. All right? So then Tamar becomes pregnant, which was her plan, by Judah. And so it's told, so people come and tell Judah, hey, Tamar has committed harlotry. And what does Judah think about that? Kill her by burning. Right? Not just death, which you could, again, if he were following that, you could say, well, maybe she was acting like a harlot, she deserved it. But it's unnecessarily brutal death.
That was reserved for those who were.
The priest under the law.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, so it's extremely brutal. So he's ready. He's done it. How dare she commit adultery? Right?
Right?
Okay.
So then he gets caught. So we'll go through this quickly, but ultimately he sends someone with the goat to pay the price. That person can't find her. Well, where's the cult prostitute? And all the people are like, well, there's been no cult prostitute around here. And he says, well, all right, just let her. I tried to give her the goat, so just let her keep his personal things. So then as she's being brought out to burn her, she says, she presents his ring and what is his staff? I forget. I'm sorry. Yeah, his cord and his staff, and says, "Oh, hey, do you recognize whose these are?" And he recognizes them. Okay, so there's this idea of he's recognizing, but he's also recognizing what else? He just got caught. Right? Okay, so he acknowledges that he is to blame, and specifically, he says, she is more righteous than I, because he didn't give her the third son the way he should have. Okay? But if you just think about that statement, the woman acting as a cult prostitute is more righteous than I am. Okay? And I mean, it's not a surprise. He is completely, the entire thing, he is so engrossed in Canaanite culture that he's willing to commit prostitution with what he thinks is a cult prostitute to idol worship. Right? He's completely acting like a Canaanite. Okay? Yes.
And she mentioned that for that third son, she would have to wait a long time.
Yeah.
And usually when you talk about an Israelite, you mention the father's name. There's no mention of her father's name, so she might be Phoenician or anything. This Israel is becoming a mixed bag of different people in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So
maybe at this point,
it's interesting. He does at least at the very end acknowledge that once he's caught, acknowledge the sin. Maybe it becomes kind of a turning point for Judah, because we're going to see it's going to take years and years and years and years, but things will change. All right, later. Okay, yeah.
The other thing too is as she's dressed as this prostitute, it talks about this veil. Obviously, he didn't recognize who this woman was.
Yes, correct.
And obviously he would know who it was. So this
It'll be something that's very hiding.
Yes.
You know, it's not a clear veil. It's something that you can't see her face at all.
And again, it's deception. It's not being able to see. It's interesting. The place where they are is called Two Eyes, but he doesn't see who he's with. So, okay, our time is up. That was the second bell. I just want to real quick point out, so the result of that is that she has twins, actually, all right? And it tells us the story of their birth. Why? Because, why is it important which one comes out first? The birthright. The birthright of Judah himself, because that son, remember, that now we're on to that son, the oldest son, is going to be credited to the oldest son of Judah. All right, so that's going to have the birthright of Judah. And again, it's a weird situation because one baby puts his hand out, they tie the cord on it, they think, oh, this is the oldest, they're marking, this is really important, this is the oldest, but then he pulls it back in and the other one comes out. All right, the other one is called Perez. His name means breach because he made a breach and came out unexpectedly first. And why is Perez important?
He's in the line of Christ, right? He's going to be in the line of David. We see that in Ruth, and then ultimately in Matthew, he's in the line of David. All right, our time is up. All right, important. Number one, again, children all too often repeat the sins of their parents. We've seen that. Lies and deceit ruin people's lives. It matters who you marry. Evil companions corrupt good morals. And what is my response when confronted with sin? At least the one thing you could say about Judah is that he recognizes that it was his sin at the very end. Okay? All right, thank you. On Wednesday is chapter 39, just one chapter, chapter 39. Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, you're right.